Hello and welcome to Spiritual Research Network. My name is Chris Lawson and I'm the founder and president of SRN. I'd just like to run a few things by you here real quick. What would you think if your pastor was doing yoga? Would you appreciate that? Would you think that was a real progressive type thing? We live in the year 21st century, year 2012. Yeah, my pastor does yoga. Or would it grieve you? Would you think, why is my pastor doing a practice that's a Hindu practice that they do in India, that the yogis do to come into a state of self-realization and realizing that you're one with the universe and that you're all a part of God? I mean, what's your response? I got a couple emails and a phone call from some individuals recently, which will go not named here, but they actually have left their church because their pastor was doing yoga. You think, well, yeah, I can see that happening in a church that's, more liberal and kind of cutting edge, and, not one of those really biblical type churches. Well, it's interesting because actually it was a Calvary Chapel. Now, if you're watching this video and you come from the Calvary Chapel movement, you'll know that Calvary Chapels have been known across the world for expositional teaching through the Scriptures. Well, I was actually quite disheartened to hear that there's a very well-known, big-name Calvary Chapel pastor who does yoga. And even uses it as a defense to bring in contemplative mystical type curriculum into the church. Now this is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, I can see if it's a more liberal type church setting, but this is a church that is a well-known church, and yet the pastor is doing yoga, and the people have gone to talk to the pastor about this, and pastor doesn't want to be accountable, doesn't see a problem with it. Sits in a meditation garden at the Self-Realization Fellowship, which is the well-known yoga cult of Paramahansa Yogananda back in the 1920s. Yes, that's right. The pastor sits in the Self-Realization Fellowship meditation garden, has his quiet times there, talks to people. Now that's his own prerogative. He can do whatever he wants. But what kind of example is that? I actually visited the Self-Realization Fellowship. I went into the bookstore. And when I was in the bookstore, the first thing I saw as I walked through the front door was the King James Version of the Bible sitting right on the shelf next to a multitude of cultic teachings by the cult leader Paramahansa Yogananda. Yogananda was actually commissioned by the Hindu movement that he was involved with in India, and he was commissioned to bring yoga to the West. Down in Encinitas, California, they established the SRF Fellowship down there. There's one in Pasadena, California, and there are several of them around the world. Now, I just have to simply ask, what in the world is a Calvary Chapel pastor doing going to the meditation gardens, spending time there, talking with people there, and then Now you may think, well, that's just one isolated case. Well, actually it's not. I've sat in a church office before with 3 other pastors, Calvary Chapel pastors, and gone around the boat with them, of them trying to convince me that there's nothing wrong with Christians doing yoga. I don't know where the movement's headed, but this isn't a good thing. You think, well, that's just a couple churches. Well, take for instance Rick Warren's church, Saddleback Church in Southern California. They have integrated a movement into their own fellowship, which is Brooke Boon's movement called Holy Yoga. Now, if you haven't seen what Holy Yoga is, or you don't understand what Holy Yoga is, it's supposedly Christian yoga. Well, the same training curriculum that is being used all over the United States is actually being integrated through Brooke Boon's yoga program. Same training. They've just removed some of the Hindu philosophy and integrated a little bit of Christian philosophy in there, teaching. And they're doing this as a spiritual Christian practice for exercise. Rick Warren has allowed this in his church setting. Now, this is just simply unbelievable. I mean, he's recognized as America's pastor type of thing. But why in the world would you integrate Christian yoga into the church setting as a form of worship, as a form of honoring God with your exercise? This is absolutely unbelievable as far as the lack of discernment. And what you can do is basically, if you want to know what yoga really is about, you look at the teachings and practices that are brought forth from the Hindu gurus themselves, because that's where yoga came from. It came from the East. And people are brought up West thinking we can just call it exercise, call it holy yoga, call it Christian yoga, Yahweh yoga. And I mean, what an absolute travesty. Christians falling into this trap, big name pastors thinking they can bring yoga into their churches. At the end of the day, it's like this. If we're going to talk about Christian yoga, why not just integrate Christian Reiki? I mean, Reiki, energy work, it's laying on your hands, and Reiki is a form of spirit channeling energy. Same thing with Qigong. Qigong is a form of ancient Chinese occult energy channeling. Well, there's Christian Qigong, there's Christian Reiki, there's Christian therapeutic touch. Therapeutic touch, in the occult sense, is laying your hands above someone's body, anywhere from 2 to 6 inches, and doing energy work, working with your guides, you see. That's a form of spiritism, spirit contact. This is demonic. This is clearly unbiblical. This is a form of occultism coming into the churches. And there are pastors that are allowing this sort of stuff. Now, is Rick Warren and Calvary Chapel pastors bringing in Reiki and Christian Qigong and this sort of stuff? Well, I just have to say, not yet. You think, well, that's pretty extreme for me to say that. Well, if we've got Christian yoga already, if they don't put a stop to it, you're going to have it in a bunch of them. It's just how it's going to be. Where's the standard gone? Where has the biblical standard gone? Is anybody going to say something? I mean, Rick Warren's brought 3 New Age doctors into his Daniel plan, diet plan. You know, Daniel didn't go on a diet just simply to lose weight in the book of Daniel. No, he chose to have vegetables and water because he was separating from what the king's portion was. It was a statement that Daniel is separate, separated unto the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay? And yet Rick Warren has changed the whole thing around, and he said, let's do the Daniel plan diet. Great, let's get everybody involved with exercise, losing weight, and hey, that's wonderful. I'm not going to knock that. You want to lose some weight? That's fine. But don't bring in Reiki, New Ageism, yoga, energy work, and all this sort of occult technique stuff and mix it in with these doctors that say it's okay to do this stuff, and they have recommended some of these things in their books, and they're recommending other books that they've endorsed that are absolutely full-blown spirit-type indoctrination into forms of the occult. This is dangerous. And yet, why has Rick Warren allowed this? It just it doesn't make sense, except to say that there's spiritual deception going on. And for the fact that Rick Warren can't even see this is well, that's where the movement's at. That's where the movement's at. And people are being brought right into it. Undiscerning church leaders have brought it to the people. The undiscerning people who are untaught in the scriptures just grab onto it. And, you know, if you go to the Daniel plan on Rick Warren's website, the Saddleback Church website, you'll just read article after article, you know, of these doctors promoting their own books and then sending you off to another place with links that you would get to go to another website, and they're providing us like a smorgasbord of spirituality that is unbiblical, it's unchristian, and it's downright evil. And if you think I'm making this up, you can do the research yourself. Just go and take a look at it. Don't take my word for it. I've done the research. I've spent hours. I've spent hundreds of hours. In fact, I've spent thousands of hours over the last 20 some odd years looking at different things and saying, you know what, that is not Christian. That's not Christian. That's not Christian. And saying this doesn't line up with Scripture. And then I go back to my Bible and I read the Scriptures. And God says, be separate, be set apart. Don't partake of these things. And then we find churches like Saddleback Community Church, some of the Calvary Chapels, Foursquare churches, Assembly of God churches, Vineyard churches, you name it. A lot of churches are bringing stuff in that they shouldn't be. And the thing is at the end of the day is you just have to go back to Scripture. So if you're doing yoga as a Christian, I think you ought to take a second look at it. Why is it dangerous? Why has your pastor brought it into the church?